Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hey, my name is Matt. I recently made a post on Reddit just talking about Google Firebase and kind of the system of what people like and what people don't like about it. I've actually been using it for the last couple of years. I really like it, but there's a couple things I don't like with the billing system. A couple people in Reddit said that, like, hey, we can do billing alerts, but it doesn't do like a hard shutdown of billing. So that's something that always kind of scares me of, like, oh, if I write a stupid function and it does an infinite loop. I once had it do an infinite loop for like 45 seconds or so, and it cost me like $18, and luckily I caught it right away. But that's something that, as like a hobby developer, you're not trying to get in those kind of situations. Also, I didn't love the mobile development of it. So when you're trying to develop an application and you're trying to use the functions of it, and the database and kind of tying everything together, it's a little bit clunky. So I really wanted to just kind of create a spin-off of Google Firebase and essentially have it where, I'm not sure how to explain it, but essentially have it in a single node application. So this would include all the database functionality, all the authentication functionality, all the database functions. So say if you write to a certain node, so say if you write to the users node and you want to create a function that automatically creates some information and populates it in that user node, then you can do that with a function. Or say if you want to run a function to do some kind of calculations on the server, then you can go ahead and create that. And a lot of what we're doing here as like indie developers or people that are getting into coding, you're like, we're not trying to have these auto scaling systems that can support 50 million active users at a time. Like, we're lucky if we're going to get a couple thousand at most. So this database actually does scale decently well. I think it's not horizontal scaling, but it's vertical scaling. So we could add a couple more CPUs, and essentially stretch the reads and writes. But currently on a single node, on a VPS, well, actually a single node on my personal computer, it's running like 100,000 reads a second and like 30,000 writes a second. So if you're doing anything that's faster than that, then you have a lot bigger problems. But if you're just running, like, I essentially run this database. We've been running it for, I think, like the last 6 months or so, for a contact form for a local auto body shop, essentially. So people fill out the contact form online, and then that gets sent to the backend database, and then it's just like an easy way of storing everything. And I used to use Google Firebase for it, but I was like, man, this is so complicated when we're just trying to run a simple application. So let's go ahead and dive into it real quick. So these are some of the functions that we can actually use, just to kind of test it out. So as you can see on this left hand side, we have a public folder, we have a server folder, and then we have a couple other things, just like a normal node application essentially. So the public is everything that you can go ahead and access publicly. The server side of it, the app, is what you actually build your app. So this is just a super simple little game that I built. We're not going to actually run the game, but as you can see, we can go ahead and set up SSL certificates, so we can have just like a normal website that runs the database. Or we can develop locally. So there's this little flag right here. It says local true. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let's go ahead and stop it. And then let's go ahead and start the database. So essentially we just do node app.js. So what this does is it starts the database on, my kids are sleeping right now. So it starts the database, and as you can see, as I refresh the page, let's go ahead and go to the index.js file. We can say that we set user John 2 and age 32. So as you can see this set success. You can also see that the get function works as well. So we're getting all the users under the users node, and you can see that the data pops out as John 1 and John 2. So now let's go ahead and say John 2, magically he aged to 83. What we can go ahead and do is just save that, stop the database, restart it, and go ahead and refresh. And as you can see, the set function worked correctly, and the get function, we can see that John 2 is now 83. So this is just a really fast way where we can just develop and we can spin up the database instantly. Now let's go ahead and do a couple other functions. So let's say we want to go ahead and update. Hold on, my kiddo. Sorry guys, that was my kiddos. So where were we? So we got age 83, and we can see that that changed it. Now let's go ahead and do an update function. So let's go ahead and uncomment this. And let's go ahead and assign it to users John 2. And let's go ahead and put his name as John. And let's go ahead and add some more details. Let's go ahead and say his car. And this is just literally JSON objects that we're dealing with, so nothing crazy. Let's go ahead and do a car is a Tesla Model Y. Or Tesla. I'll just put Tesla. So now what we can do is we are going to, let's uncomment these two. You know what? Let's go ahead and start commanding this. There we go. There we go. I recently got this new Mac, so I'm still getting used to it. Let's stop the database. Let's restart the database. And let's go ahead and refresh the database. So we updated that. Let's go ahead and get that information. So let's do that, and then that. And then we'll go ahead and save it, stop it, and restart it. And then we're going to go ahead and retrieve that information. And now you can see John 2 has some additional information. So updating it does not override anything in the node, but essentially just adds to it. So now what we can also do is this has great query functionality. So essentially with Firebase, the real-time database, I loved it, but you couldn't query more than like 30 fields or 10 fields or whatever, or you couldn't do like certain like array contains, which is really helpful in a lot of ways. So let's go ahead and query the users field, and as you can see, we have some rules functions. So this is just kind of like a basic overview, seeing like, hey, is anyone interested in this? Is this something cool that like I should continue developing? Or is this something like, hey, we probably wouldn't like it? So as you can see, we have a query as true under the users field. And if we want to write any information, we just have to make sure it's not null. So everything that we were writing in the specific user field was not null, so everything was going through. But let's go ahead and say we can do query as false. So let's go ahead and save that. And then let's go ahead and stop the database. And then let's go ahead and go back to the query functionality. And let's go ahead and query, and how the query functionality works is you're querying a certain node. So let's go ahead and go users. And then you go query, and then you go child, which is any of the child elements of that node. Let's go ahead and say child age, and then let's just say is more than. Let's go child age is more than 40. So it should return John 2 and not John 1. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and restart the database. Let's go ahead and refresh. Ooh, path not found. So you catch that. User should be users. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and stop it. Restart it. Now let's go ahead and refresh it. And failed query. Ooh, why'd it fail? Maybe because we just set the rules to fail. So let's just go ahead and do true and save this. Let's go back, restart, and the query should work now. Yep. And as you can see, it returns John 2. Now let's go ahead and query. Let's go ahead and query car equals Tesla. But we got to make sure we put it in quotes because it is a string that we're searching for here. Let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and stop the database and restart it. And as you can see, success, still brings up John 2, and it doesn't matter that the other John 1 does not have data. It essentially, let's go ahead and go, there we go. As you can see, John 1 doesn't have the car field, but it'll still retrieve all the nodes, which is John 1 and John 2, with, if you're searching for something that has car, it's only going to return them if they have the car and if the value equals true. So yeah, this is kind of the database function. We also have some like subscribing to certain paths. So let's go ahead and go, instead of query, let's go ahead and stop that, and let's go to get sub. So let's go ahead and, so we're going to subscribe to users, and the value represents anything that is changing. So this is get, update, or remove on a certain node. So it'll automatically trigger. If you only want to trigger when it's a get, or if you only want to trigger if it's a set or an update, then essentially you can just change this value to set, or update, or you can do remove. So it'll only trigger if the database got updated at that path, or if the database set at that path, or if the database had a node that was removed at that path. Or if you want to just do everything, then we can do value. So let's just go ahead and copy this and pop it over. So let's go ahead and save that. Users query get sub. I don't think we need, and like I said, this is all in super development stage, so a lot of these things we're still trying to figure out. Why is get sub wrong? I think you only need 2. Alright, let's stop this. Let's restart it. Let's go and refresh it. Success, get sub. Okay, so get sub works. Now, let's go ahead and copy this. So what we're going to do is after we get the data, we're going to go ahead and add to the data again. And what that is going to do is it's going to trigger this database like when we're subscribing to a certain part of the database. So anything that's going to update under the users field, it should trigger. So let's go ahead and just add a new user called Joe, and let's make his name let's make his age 103. So let's go ahead and save this, stop the database, and then we'll restart it, and then I'll go ahead and refresh it. So as we can see, get sub, we got John 1 and John 2. We have a successful set, and then we have a trigger success. So this trigger is based on we subscribe to that part of the database. So now you can see that now we have Joe, and his name, or his age is 103. So this allows us to write to certain parts of the database, read, update, remove. We can also query certain parts of the database. We can go ahead and subscribe to certain parts of the database. And then we can also write data. And this is all via WebSocket. So everything's real-time connection here. And we can write straight up files to the database. So if we're trying to save like photos or videos or anything like that, we have a function called set file. So yeah, this runs completely in a Node.js instance. This does not require a lot of memory. The whole database file by itself, reveal in Finder, this is unminified. I think that's how you say it. And it's 39 kilobytes. So we're talking tiny here. So we can probably get sub 30 kilobytes to run a whole database essentially. And kind of how the database works is it's so fast because it strictly writes to memory. So what happens is the data is saved via file. So yeah, as you can see, here's the data right here. Actually, let me go and exit that. Don't save. We'll reopen it. As you can see, we have all the data right here. So let's go ahead and, oopsie, there we go. So as you can see, we have all the data right here. Super simple, easy to find. The rules functionality, we have all the same rules functionality as Firebase. Very similar, not the same, very similar though. And then our app is essentially like where all of our cloud functions are going to live, but they're not cloud functions because they're running on the individual node instance. So essentially, instead of hosting it through Firebase, you're just renting out a VPS. So this can run on DigitalOcean, literally on a $4 DigitalOcean instance, and it's super, super easy to run. Sorry, kiddo interrupted me again. So yeah, we can run this on a $4 DigitalOcean VPS. Like, we're talking minimal commitment to get an app up and running. The other really cool function or feature about this is essentially we can add functions, just like Cloud Functions. Everything lives, or not like Cloud Functions. Everything is going to live in the node instance. So, for example, if we want to do like a function right here. So this one is for this little game. Essentially what it does is it's like a reaction time game. So when the game starts, it essentially counts down 5 seconds, and then it changes a node in the database. All those users have subscribed to that node, and then they can go ahead and click the button to see who clicks it the fastest. So as you can see right here, we have this is the path that we're trying to match. If data is written to this path, then essentially it'll trigger this, so it gets the rooms, blah, blah, blah. So we can run functions just like Google Firebase functions, and we can go ahead and run HTTP requests. So as you can see, this is like a contact form. This is actually just getting the file for it. So yeah, like I said, it's all super like new. I've been messing around with it and kind of building it for essentially since last December. So it's getting to the point where it's kind of robust, but it's still like super new. If anyone's interested or kind of has questions about it, it's got some cool functionalities. I'm always adding new stuff. Essentially right now it has set, get, update, remove, query. You can get sub. You can get sub changed. So that is getting, you can get sub is essentially you're subscribing to a certain path, but you're just getting it. You're not querying it. Get sub changed is anything that changed on that path. It only returns that aspect of the database. Query sub, essentially same thing. We are querying the data at that path. So that's where I showed you earlier. We can query if age is more than 40. Query sub change, same thing. We can just get the changed value of the query. So say if something changed and it's within our query parameters, it'll just return that. We can go ahead and set file. I'm still adding on like server side increment, so we can like increment a certain number on the server. And then we have all the cloud functions. So that's if you want to have custom functions based on if the database was written at a certain path. We have the HTTP functions, and we have the rules functions, which the rules are even more robust than Google Firebase. We have full array search, array contains. We can go ahead and reference other parts of the database. The authentication right now, there's not a great amount of authentication. Essentially kind of how the auth works is we pass in the auth state, and this is from the client side, so it's just like a password, and then we see, but we can go ahead and query that and see if that password exists in a certain part of the database. So yeah, thought you guys may like this. Sorry for the long video. This is just kind of a breakdown of what I've been working on. I do eventually want to like try to release this. So yeah, give me your guys' inputs. All right, thanks so much, guys. Bye.